I recently did a video where I did a study of a panel by John Romita Sr. And at the end of that video, I asked some of you if you would like to see me ink that study. And so I recently finally got around to inking that. And here you go. Here's a look at the ink study. I just thought that this was a really cool panel. It's a great composition. There's a lot of classic comic tropes within it. And to my knowledge, it's also inked by John Romita Sr. himself. So like the way I look at most of the studies I do, if only 1% of the artistry and genius of the artist that I'm studying rubs off on me, then the study is well worth it. It was a fun process. I've been doing a lot of inking studies lately. I'll talk more about that in some future videos, but I recorded the whole process. And if you would like to see about a 30-minute video of me inking this panel, head on over to my Patreon. That's where lately I've been adding a lot of bonus footage to this particular channel, as well as just uploading a bunch of exclusive content that I'm not sharing anywhere else. I've been having a lot of fun over there, and it's a great way to sort of build upon and go a little bit deeper on some of the things that I talk about in these videos. So if you want to watch that, again, the link is in my bio. You can check out that video as well as a bunch of exclusive content that I've been uploading recently. But as far as this video is concerned, that particular panel that I was studying, the John Romita Sr. panel, comes from an Amazing Spider-Man issue, and it's titled The Wings of the Vulture. That particular issue can be found in this gigantic artist edition. Some of you might remember a very old video where I went through this artist edition. It's not the only video that I've made on John Romita Sr.'s work. I'm a big fan of his. He's a big inspiration to me. But since in that older video where we kind of breezed through this book, I thought we would focus on just one issue within this artist edition. And this Wings of the Vulture issue, I think is pretty awesome. It has a lot of the things that I think make John Romita Sr.'s work incredible or amazing. So in this video, we're gonna go through that whole issue page by page, looking through the original art artist edition version of it. This is going to be a fun one for anyone who's a fan of John Romita Sr.'s work, as well as any comic art aficionado, especially those like me that love the retro approach to making comics. If you haven't seen that recent video of mine where I do a pencil study of a panel from this issue, and you want to put this in a little bit more context, I'll link that video somewhere around here. So without further ado, sit back and enjoy. Let's take a look at this amazing issue of Amazing Spider-Man in original art form. All right, The Wings of the Vulture, an issue out of this John Romita Amazing Spider-Man Artist Edition. This is, as far as I can tell, according to the credits here, it looks like it was drawn completely by John Romita. So no inker. It looks like he was inking his own pencils. If there were an inker, it would have said inker or sometimes finished by. So I'm going to assume that this whole issue was penciled and inked by John Romita, which is incredible. He was a very skilled artist in both disciplines. Back then, there wasn't as much of a distinction between penciler and inker as there was in more modern day comics. Most comic artists, both pencilers and inkers, were very well-rounded in both disciplines. This issue was lettered by Sam Rosen, which is cool because back then, all the lettering was done straight onto the drawing page itself, which is really, really beautiful. And just a testament to the craftsmanship in comics back then. All this beautiful title, logo lettering, as well as all the dialogue boxes, word bubbles. And as far as I know, the process went layouts / pencils, and then the drawing board would go to the letterer, who would then do all the lettering and ink the lettering onto the pages. And then that artist who penciled would either ink his own work, or he would tighten up his pencils and then send that to the inker. So really, the order was penciling, lettering, inking, and then presumably color if the work was going to get colored. So lettering was a much more integral part of the process, which is different from the way modern comics goes about it, where lettering is kind of like an overlay over the finished art. And I think that process, that order, the way it used to be, was one of the reasons why there's like an artfulness to the lettering itself. Not that there isn't today, but there's a cohesiveness to the art where the lettering feels like finished inked artwork, and it kind of matches the same tone and craftsmanship of the drawing itself. It's not like a digital font that lays on top of the art and kind of exists on its own plane. This was a much more holistic kind of approach to making comics. And look at that opening splash page. Really, really great example of that. With art in comics and in illustration, I'm sort of a sucker for anything that involves snow. I don't like to be in the snow as much as I like to look at it in black and white art and draw it as well. There's something really satisfying to just putting white paint down on top of your inked lines, and just graphically it makes the art pop. It's a really nice pattern and an effect that I think makes black and white art sing in a lot of ways. So if there's a story that involves a superhero like Spider-Man in the snow, I'm all for it, especially if it gives you panels like this. I probably mentioned this the last time we looked through this Romita Artist Edition, but a lot of these older comics, especially during this era, were drawn much, much bigger than obviously the final printed comic, but also much bigger than the way comics are drawn today. I measured these pages and it looks like this was drawn on roughly 13 and a half by like 19 or 20. Whereas most mainstream comics shortly after this time were drawn a standard 11 by 17 size, which is much smaller than this. I think this very large size allowed for a lot more detail in each panel, as well as a lot more attention to lettering. And there was a lot more dialogue and words on a page back then, just because a lot of the story was really fleshed out after the fact in dialogue. So the words were really very much a reaction to the visual art that was on the page. And because they were trying to cram so much story into these issues back then, there was a lot of dialogue on each page and in most of these panels. And I think working at this very large size really benefited fitting all of that on there while not making it look crammed. It also allowed for these really, really beautiful compositions that oftentimes had a lot of really well thought out foreground, middle ground, and background compositions. And the artists were really able to just kind of sink their teeth into all the detail that was happening within each panel. Seeing it at full scale in these artist editions is really such a treat because you can see all the attention to detail and care in each brushstroke. And as controlled and detailed as so much of this stuff was, because they were working at such a large scale, there was a sort of whimsy and energy to the brush lines too that was put down with what kind of seems to be an artist's like whole hand or whole arm. You really get the feel that these guys were putting this ink down in almost like a painterly way. And the bold way of inking panels like this, for instance, I just love the way just the feathers in the vulture's wings here were inked and drawn. And compared to the more gestural, sketchy lines of these background characters, it really creates that depth and sense of space. And seeing it again at this scale just makes you appreciate all the artistry that was put into like every panel in these comics back then. I love how an artist like Romita was able to draw these really superhero, graphic, dynamic panels. And then right after that, the next panel is this very mundane kind of composition of a guy just shoveling snow and two cars being shown within the panel. This can be a very boring panel to have to draw, but the sign of a really great comic artist is when it looks like the artist put just as much care and interest and excitement into the cool, fun panel as they did the more mundane storytelling panel. And in a lot of ways, Romita's stuff, I kind of like the more quiet storytelling stuff that he does. It's the Peter Parker, Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy panels and pages that I like even more sometimes than the more superhero stuff. I think he was really, really great at that like melodrama, comic strip feel of some of these pages. And he was able to bring the characters to life just with like his facial expressions and body language. Being a fan of old Archie comics, he kind of evokes that same kind of Harry Lucy, Dandy Carlo kind of feel to some of his Peter Parker pages. And I just love that stuff. Like right here, that's such a great example of using body language as a great storytelling device. Both Romita and Buscema, a lot of these older Marvel artists were really illustrators at heart. And they were able to capture like the subtlety of the human face and the figure in a way that really lent itself to this kind of storytelling as well as the more dynamic superhero stuff. In a lot of these artist editions, the people who put these books together don't always have access or can't find certain pages. So anytime there's a missing page that they weren't able to scan from the original, they substitute it with just a black and white version of that page. So we'll disregard these pages just because they're not scanned from the original. But in the end, it's amazing that so many of these pages were found and accounted for in order to put these artist editions together. Phones. Romita draws the best phones. I could probably make a whole collection of just Romita phones. But it's another great example of how he's able to make anything look good, from a rotary phone to a cool shot of Spider-Man sticking to a wall looking over the city. And Romita is able to utilize line weight in such a great way just by inking Spider-Man in this foreground with a bolder line and much stronger, brushier, feathering lines. And then, of course, inking that background very loose and opened. It's all just outlines because it's snowing, so it would be much more white. It's in the distance, so it's going to be lighter lines. And he's also trying to create that sense of depth. So it's economical in the sense that he's using less lines to describe this scene, which in turn is less time, which is one of the really important things when you're drawing monthly comics. But it also serves a purpose from a storytelling perspective. So that's really an example out of making the best out of everything at your disposal when it comes to making comics not only look good, but read clearly, make sense, and do them on time. Something that these guys back then were just masters of. Look at that panel. That's just amazing. Just the right amount of tension to that bridge. Obviously, he wants our eye to go here and not so much back here. So these buildings are just drawn with very, very few lines, but it creates depth in such a clear, easy looking way, but much easier said than done. It's hard to tell what he was inking with. I'm going to assume it's mostly a brush for the figure work and a lot of the feathering and shadow effects. And then there's obviously a bunch of straight lines for the backgrounds, the bridge in this case, the car. He was either using some sort of technical pen or maybe even a crow quill pen. I'm not quite sure. If anyone in the comments knows exactly the type of inking supplies that Romita would have been using, definitely leave that in the comments. Again, I'm assuming a lot of this is brush, especially the way the vulture is inked throughout this issue. Also putting the brush to work in these really big panels like that. Man, what a great shot of Spider-Man, and just an awesome panel. Would Romita himself have done the sound effect here, or was that left for the letterer? I don't know. I'm assuming that was a lettering thing, but again, it looks such a part of the art itself that it's hard to distinguish between the two, which is what gives it that real holistic kind of look. And then again, there's that really great body language. He's even able to utilize it in these more action superhero panels. And then we're back to the more human melodrama part of the story here. Like I said, I really love when he does this stuff. Just the way he inks this figure right here, these bold brush strokes, just to suggest the folds in the jacket here. Just this panel alone, these three characters here, that's study worthy. I might note that for my sketchbook warm-up one day soon. Really great shapes here in the drapery. And then here we are, our favorite panel. This is the one we're doing a study of. I spent a lot of time looking at this panel, so I feel like it's imprinted in my mind in many ways. I just love the composition of this panel and the inking work in particular. One of the reasons why I singled it out to do a study of. And it's right at the end of this issue, second to last page, until we end with a real nice dramatic shot of Spidey in the snow. Super simplistic. Spider-Man's costume is one of the harder costumes to draw, and I give credit to any Spider-Man monthly artist throughout time who's been able to draw him consistently and in an exciting way throughout just one single issue. That has to be a challenge in and of itself. And in my opinion, Romita Sr. was the best to ever draw him. Not an easy shot either, to draw someone laying down, especially in that kind of a twisted pose, but he's able to do it in such a simple way that makes it look easy. If you couldn't tell from this video, this artist edition is really awesome. It collects a bunch of issues in consecutive order of John Romita Sr.'s run on Amazing Spider-Man. And if you're interested in taking a look page by page through another single issue from this book, let me know in the comments below. It might be a fun thing to look at a different issue from this book. The cool thing about this era of Amazing Spider-Man, especially Romita Sr.'s run on it, is that the issues kind of go back and forth between the more superhero action stuff, where we get introduced to a lot of these iconic villains, but then also that melodrama, romance, almost comic strip storylines that Romita Sr. was so good at too, the Peter Parker stuff. So if you'd like to see a video where we go through one of those more Peter Parker focused issues, there's some really great ones in this collection. Personally, that's some of my favorite stuff of Romita's. Like I mentioned, this isn't the first John Romita Sr. video I've done, and I have a feeling it's not going to be the last. So I'm sure we'll be looking at his work again on this channel in some capacity. Anyway, I hope you dig this video. If you did, please do hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, please do consider subscribing to the channel. The channel's growing and it's really awesome to see. I'm really close to hitting 10K subscribers, which is amazing. I want to thank all of you for your comments, your likes, your shares, and just your general interest in the videos that I've been making. I plan on doing a 10K Q&A video soon, once I hit 10K. If you have a specific question that you want me to answer in that video, leave it here in the comments of this video. Please do state that it's a Q&A question, and I'll add it to the list of some of the questions that I've already been gathering. Also, once again, if you want to see the inking video behind the study of one of the panels from this issue. That's going to be over on my Patreon. If you like this channel and some of the things that I do here, you might really dig the Patreon. I go even deeper, and there's a ton of bonus footage stuff that not only corresponds to some of these videos, but a bunch of other stuff that I'm working on outside of this. So check out that link in my bio if you're interested in that. Other than that, that's all I got. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.